Well, thanks everybody for joining. We're going to go over 9-dot, and they have multiple products in their portfolio. They have solutions for PoE, synchronization, they have rectifiers, battery chargers, isolated DC-DC converters, and they all come with remote control. So when we look at tower sites, towers have all different power options needed for most equipment being installed today. When you think about your tower site with all the different powered equipment like your backhauls, DC and fiber options, even direct DC for E-node-Bs and access points, there never seems to be a standard PoE for all of the radios at the tower site when you really need it. And unfortunately, when you have all these different products at the site and you have all these different power supplies, you run into scenarios like this. There's really nothing more permanent than a temporary install when you're out in the field trying to get something put in quickly. So the more power options equals more cables. And for every different power supply or AC to DC converter, you're going to need a different cord, different power outlet, and you're going to run into scenarios like this. So this actually would be considered a well-maintained installation, but it still requires a lot of different power sources. Most of the time, they're all separate PoE injectors, unlike this diagram, with different AC to DC converters and DC to DC converters. In this example, it shows you have an AC to DC converter, whether it's supplying 24 volts or 29 volts, and then you have another one supporting a PoE device that supports 56 volts. And then you have something as standard as a PoE switch with 802.3 AFAT. So there's a lot of different things at the tower site. Unfortunately, most of the time it's individual power supplies, different sync units, so on and so forth. Now, with a 9-dot GigaSync installation, you have one device that supports direct DC power, 48 volts PoE, 29 volts PoE, synchronization for your proprietary products, so when we're looking at the GigaSync, it's an all-in-one power device, fanless, GPS sync in and out, low profile being a 1RU, short circuit and surge protection, one management system, 3 isolated inputs, floating ground, high output power on each port, whether we're talking about the DC or PoE. And the GUI interface is easy to configure. It's simple. It shows each port what's going on. You can actually go in and turn on and off your port. If you have a radio that you need to power cycle, instead of driving out to the tower site, doing a truck roll, you can actually maintain it and do it here. If you don't have a power system that you can shut the power on a managed power switch. So here's a base unit. With the GigaSync, the base unit comes with the command unit and then all of the ports on the back. Now it has 3 open slots for cartridges, and you can mix and match. You can put DC in there, you can put PoE, and there's a couple different PoE cartridges you can use. But on the back side, you have an end-female GPS connector. So if you want to just use a standalone GPS antenna for your synchronization, if you're using something like Cambium, then each cartridge has the ability to have redundant power going into them. And they can be different. You can have 29 volts on one, you can have 48 volts on the other, and then 56 on the other port. Then next to it, you have your main power. So that actually powers up the unit for the command unit. And then if you're doing synchronization and you have a UGPS on site, or you have a CMM4 or CMM5, you can actually put sync in, or you can give sync out. Then on the far end, you have an Ethernet port. So when we talk about the different cartridges that can go in it, there's 2 PoE cartridges that can be used with this GigaSync. And each one supports 2 different Giga keys. And the Giga keys will give us our pin out for whatever we're powering up. So the GSG PoE supports a mode B Giga key and a mode A plus B Giga key. Now the GSG PoE CS supports mode 9 sync and mode B reverse. And here's a description on the Giga keys to go with the different modules. So mode 9 sync is compatible with the 450M, the 450i, CI or intercom. And then mode B reverse is compatible with the Cambium 450. Mode B is compatible with MikroTik and Ubiquiti. And then mode A plus B is compatible with your other devices that are 802.3 AF AT. And then we have the terminal cartridge. So if you're dealing with backhauls that are taking direct DC in and you're running fiber down the tower, or if you're dealing with a need no B that takes direct power, they're bipolar blocks, so depending on if they're plus or minus 48. You can actually monitor the consumption. There's protection built in, and they're high power ports. They'll do 150 watts per port. Each port is manageable. If you have a device that's on the tower and you can still access the tower and you need to power cycle it, you can log into your GigaSync and actually power cycle that device. So just on the GigaSync, just to sum up this single device, you can power up your proprietary products, give them synchronization when needed, and you also can power up your standard 802.3 products, and also still be able to give direct DC input where needed on your backhauls or Bs or access points. So if the GigaSync is a little much for your tower and it's a small tower on the outskirts of your network and you don't need that large of a distribution for your PoEs, they have a light sync. And that actually will support Cambium sync. And it's got a GPS sync in, got the N female connector there. Once again, it's high power for both of the gigabit PoE ports. So if we're to break down the light sync, it's very similar to one of the PoE cartridges. You have your sync status on the LED on the left-hand side. You have your PoE pinout, which would take your Giga key. Right next to that, you have your LAN and PoE ports. And then once again, you have the same Giga key port and your LAN and PoE port. And then there's the input power, your sync source selector, and your sync input port. So if you're receiving synchronization from something that's using Ethernet, like if you want a daisy chain, a CMM5 or a CMM4 or a UGPS. And then as standard, there's an N female connector on there if you just want to use a standard GPS antenna. So to help with all the powering of all these devices that they have an N-Core and an N-Core Lite coming out. They'll actually be in distribution in the US in June. So it's coming right up. It's ideal current flow, instant online, has built-in battery life simulation, dynamic charge. It can prioritize loads, reactive and proactive mode, a variable input or variable output voltage, and it's really easy to use. So when we're talking about the output voltages that the N-Core or N-Core Lite will do, they'll support 12 volts, 29 volts, 48 volts, and 54 volts out. Here's an example of the N-Core Lite. It's got 2 input slots. Each slot supports 800 watts. So together, they can do 1,600 watts out of one chassis. Now, the modules can actually be powered up with AC-DC, or they can be DC to DC. So if you only have AC at your site, you can plug this unit in, and it will go ahead and have DC on the output. And the really great thing about it is, even though you plugged AC into it, you still have those different output features. So it's not just 48 volts out. It's not just 29 volts out. The charger supports lead acid and lithium batteries with variable charging currents, 1 amp, 5 amps, and 10 amps. And with the light version, you support 8 ports. Each port is protected against short circuit and can be enabled remotely. So when we look at the base unit, it shows your 8 output connectors, your battery connector for supporting your battery system, your 2 AC to DC or DC to DC modules. On the back side, you have your Ethernet connector and 2 non-blocking redundant fans. Now, if you have a lot more at your site, and the N-Core Lite's just not gonna do it for you, they have the N-Core, which supports 3 input slots of 800 watts. Same setup. Will handle AC to DC and DC to DC modules. So again, it still handles the LED, the lead acid, and lithium batteries with the same variable currents. On this one, it has 5 output slots. So 4 per slot supports 20 ports. And each one, again, is protected against short circuit and can be enabled remotely. So when we're looking at the base unit, it comes with a battery charger module and command module. And then you can populate it however you'd like. So if you only need 8 ports in the beginning, you can start with just 2 modules. If you only need a couple AC to DC modules, you can do that. The blanking plates come with it. On the N-Core model, it has non-blocking redundant fans in the back as well. So why would you purchase the any of the 9-dot products through Winncom? Well, we're the only stocking distributor in North and South America currently. We also have an engineering team. This is just a team in the US that can support this product, whether it's the GigaSync or the N-Core. And then on top of our engineers, we have a full sales staff. And it covers all North and South America. Winncom is worldwide. So this is a list of all the current sales staff for North America, South America. So going through this time of all these joyous webinars, our next one is going to be with David Dockerton, and that's going to be May 21st at 2 p.m. And he's going to have a webinar on solar solutions for wireless systems and cameras. So hopefully there's some questions. Thanks for joining the 9 Dots webinar.